The principal stepped in front of me before I could walk through the door of the school gala. "Parents like you should stick to the community tables," she said. She didn't whisper it. She said it loud enough that the people behind her turned around. My 8-year-old daughter squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. My son, 11, stared down at his shoes like he could disappear into them. And the principal lifted one manicured finger, pointed toward the exit, and said the thing that made the entire ballroom go quiet. What she didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the building she was standing in existed because of me. But let me back up. Because to understand why I just stood there and took it, you have to understand who I am. My name doesn't matter as much as what I am. I'm a father. A single one. My wife, Elena, died 4 years ago on an ordinary Tuesday in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and cut flowers. One day she was helping our daughter learn to tie her shoes. The next, she was gone. And I was a man holding 2 small children and absolutely no idea how to do this alone. So I learned. I learned how to braid hair badly and pack lunches and sit through parent-teacher conferences in clothes that didn't fit the room. I worked long hours. I drove a car with a dent I never bothered to fix, and every single decision I made with 2 faces in mind. Maya and Daniel. My kids were the only thing I had left of her, and I would have walked through fire barefoot for them. They went to Brightmoor Academy, the kind of place where the parking lot looked like a luxury dealership, and the annual tuition cost more than most people's salaries. My kids were there on scholarships. At least, that's what everyone believed. That's what they believed. I let them believe it. The principal was a woman named Vivian Croft. She had been running Brightmoor for 6 years, and in that time she turned it into something closer to a country club than a school. She knew the name of every parent who drove a German car. She remembered the birthdays of board members, and she had a way of looking at people, a quick scan, top to bottom, that told you exactly where she'd filed you. The first time we met, she scanned me, smiled with her mouth only, and said, "We do have payment assistance for families who need it." I hadn't asked. After that, it was 1,000 small things. She'd skip me in donor conversations. She'd assume I couldn't afford the ski trip, the band uniforms, the spring fundraiser. When the wealthy mothers gathered in their tight little circle near the front office, their voices would drop when I walked by, then rise again into laughter once I'd passed. I knew what the laughter was about. So did my son. "Dad," Daniel asked me once, "why don't the other parents talk to you?" I told him people are just busy. He didn't believe me. He was 11, not stupid. But here's the thing about my kids. They were extraordinary. Not because of me. In spite of everything. That spring, Maya won the school's top academic award, the highest grade in her entire year, and Daniel won the regional science competition with a project on water filtration that 3 of the judges asked to keep. When the school announced its annual gala, the biggest night of the year, the night the awards would be handed out, my children weren't excited about the trophies. They were excited because for once their father was coming. "You'll be there?" Maya asked, her whole face lit up. "The whole time?" "The whole time," I promised. So I put on my one good suit, simple, dark, a little out of season. I drove my dented car to a valet stand full of cars that cost more than houses, and I walked toward those doors holding my daughter's hand and my son's shoulder, prouder than I'd been in years. That's when Vivian Croft stepped in front of me. "Parents like you should stick to the community tables," she said. I kept my voice even. "We're here for the awards. My children are receiving. The seats up front are reserved for major contributors," she cut in, gesturing at the chandeliers, the white linens, the donor table with its little gold name cards. "I'm sure you understand." Behind her, a cluster of PTA mothers watched with thin, delighted smiles. A man in a velvet blazer, a board member named Harlan Pierce, who had disliked me on sight for reasons I never bothered to learn, folded his arms and enjoyed the show. "This event," Vivian announced, loud enough now that the nearby tables had gone silent, "is supported by families who actually invest in this school." I felt Maya flinch beside me. I felt Daniel go rigid, and that, not the insult to me but the look on my children's faces, was the only thing in that room capable of making me angry. I didn't raise my voice. I found that the people who shout the loudest are usually the ones with the least to stand on. I just looked at her and said, My children earned their seats tonight. I'd like to see them get their awards. Vivian laughed, a small, dismissive sound. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to. Vivian, a new voice. Quiet, but it stopped her mid-sentence. An older woman had crossed the ballroom toward us. Grey hair, sharp eyes, a clipboard tucked under one arm. I recognized her. Eleanor Shaw. She'd been on the school board longer than anyone, and unlike the others, she actually read the document she signed. She leaned in close to the principal and murmured something I couldn't hear, a question. Vivian's smile didn't waver. Eleanor, please, Vivian said, waving a hand. Not now. I'm handling a small seating issue. Eleanor didn't move. She asked the question again, slower, and this time I caught the end of it, the name on the foundation paperwork. You've seen it, haven't you? Vivian laughed once more. Bright, certain, the laugh of a woman who has never once been wrong in public. I really don't have time for the archive tonight. Whatever it is, it can wait until. Eleanor wasn't listening anymore. She had pulled a single sheet of paper from beneath her clipboard. Just one page. She was reading it under the soft gold light of the chandelier, her lips moving slightly, and as she read, the colour drained out of her face. She looked up, not at the principal, at me. Eleanor Shaw lowered the page slowly, the way you set down something you're afraid to drop. Vivian, she said, in her voice carried now, do you know what almost happened to this school 6 years ago? The principal's smile finally cracked at the edges. I don't see what that has to do with. We were 3 weeks from closing. Eleanor said it to the whole room, not just to her. The endowment was gone. Payroll bounced. The board met in a borrowed conference room because we'd given up our offices. We were going to send 400 children home and lock the doors. The ballroom had gone completely still. Even the string quartet had stopped. And then, Eleanor continued, money arrived. Enough to clear every debt. Enough to rebuild the science wing. Enough to fund the entire scholarship program, the real one. The one that quietly pays full tuition for kids whose families could never dream of this place. She turned the page toward the light. The donor asked for one thing, to stay anonymous. We honored that. For 6 years, not one of us knew the name on this paperwork. She paused. I just read it for the first time, and then she said my name. For a moment, nobody moved. The PTA mothers near the wall looked at each other, as if waiting for someone to laugh. Harlan Pierce's arms came uncrossed. Here is the part nobody at Brightmoor knew. After Elena died, I didn't sleep for the better part of a year. So I worked. I'd built small software tools before, hobby things, and grief turned that hobby into something obsessive. I built a scheduling platform for hospitals, the kind that helps families know when a doctor is actually coming, so no one has to wait in a hallway the way I had. Hospitals bought it. Then a larger company bought all of it. I woke up one morning a man who would never have to worry about money again, and who would have traded every cent to have his wife back at the breakfast table. So I made a decision. I kept enough to raise my kids simply in our small house with the dented car, and I took the rest and built a foundation. No press release, no building with my name on the front. It funds education for children whose parents are doing exactly what I'm doing, showing up, working hard, drowning quietly. Brightmoor was the first school it ever saved. I never told anyone. I never told my own children. I didn't do it to be thanked. I did it because somewhere out there was a kid like Maya, like Daniel, who deserved a door to be held open, and I had the means to hold it. That's why my children's scholarships had always been guaranteed. The doors at the back of the ballroom opened, and the board chairman walked in. Theodore Grant, a man whose handshake closed deals across 3 continents. Eleanor must have called him the moment she read the page. He crossed straight to the small stage, tapped the microphone, and the feedback cut through the silence. Forgive the interruption, he said, but I've just learned something I think every family in this room deserves to hear. For 6 years, this academy has thanked a generous community for keeping our lights on. Tonight, I can finally thank the person who actually did it. He found me in the crowd. He didn't point. He just looked, and the whole room followed his eyes. The scholarship fund, the science wing your children compete in, the library you renovated last spring, and half of tonight's fundraising target already matched before a single guest arrived. He let that land. We owe all of it to one parent, The ones some of you may not have spoken to yet. Vivian Croft had gone the colour of the linens. I felt a small hand tug my sleeve. Maya was looking up at me and something was working behind her eyes. The math of a smart girl assembling a picture. "Daddy," she whispered. "Was it you, the whole time?" I knelt down to her level, the way I had when she was learning to tie those shoes. It was supposed to be a secret. Daniel stared at me. My quiet, watchful son, who'd asked me once why no one talked to his father. "You never told us," he said. His voice shook. "You let them say all that. You could have stopped at any time and you just stood there." "I didn't do it for credit, son," I said. "Not theirs, not yours. I did it so kids could have a chance. The second you do a thing like that for applause, it stops being worth doing." Daniel's chin trembled. Then he stepped forward and put his arms around me, right there in front of everyone. And I held both my children in a room that had stopped breathing. That was the moment that mattered. Everything after it was just consequences. Vivian recovered her voice first. She came toward me with both hands out, the smile back on, brighter than ever. "Sir? I am so deeply sorry. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. If I'd had any idea who you—" "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You'd have treated me like a king tonight if you'd known. You treated me like dirt because you thought I was nobody. That tells me everything about how you treat the families who can't save your school." She had no answer. The PTA mothers who'd laughed an hour ago were suddenly very interested in their drinks. Harlan Pierce had retreated to the far wall. Not one person in that ballroom stepped to her side. Theodore Grant wasn't finished. "Effective tonight," he announced, "the board will be conducting a full review of how families are treated at this academy. At every income level, the scholarship program will double, and we'll be forming a new parent committee with seats reserved specifically for families who've never had a voice at events like this one." He looked at Vivian and his voice cooled by 10 degrees. "Principal Croft, you and I will meet first thing tomorrow." She understood what that meant. We all did. And then the night went back to what it was supposed to be. They called Maya's name for the academic award. She walked across that stage in her second-hand dress, shoulders back, and accepted it. Then Daniel for the science prize. My serious boy who shook the chairman's hand and looked out into the lights for one face. When the applause came, the whole room stood. Every guest, even the ones who'd whispered. But here's what I want you to understand. They didn't stand because they just learned the quiet man in the cheap suit had money. Money was the least interesting thing about that night. They stood because, for the length of one humiliation, they'd watched a father refuse to trade his children's dignity for his own comfort. They stood because 2 kids had walked into that gala worried their dad didn't belong, and walked out knowing he was the reason half of them had a school at all. In the car afterward, the dented one, Maya fell asleep against the window with her trophy in her lap. Daniel sat up front with me, quiet for a long time. "Dad," he finally said, "when I grow up and I have money, I want to do it the way you did, where nobody knows." I had to wait a second before I could answer. "They thought my children needed a wealthy father," I said, mostly to the dark road ahead. What they really needed was a father who never stopped showing up, and I drove my 2 kids home.